died in February, I believe, maybe January of 1956. And then I stayed, tried to take care of the family for men until school was out in April or May. And I had an uncle, Alan P. Keaton, and he had come, he lived in Chicago, and he had come down for the weekend or something. And when I saw him and his wife and two kids, I asked him if I could go back to Chicago with him, get me a job, see what I could do. I didn't talk to my dad about it or anything. I just decided that's what I was going to do. I didn't pack any clothes or anything like that. When he left to go back to Chicago, I just hopped in the car and rode back to Chicago with him. I spent a few days at his house. I had another uncle that lived there. Uncle Edgar. He had a family. I spent a few days at his house. Of course, at that time, I had not even reached my 16th birthday. And I was out looking for a job. And I took a job with a place where you got paid every day. Manpower. You go there in the morning, you sign up, and they send you out on a job, and you work, and you come home in the end of the day, and you get $8. You get $1 an hour. Mostly, street people, winos, people like that was doing that kind of stuff. But because of my age and I didn't have any experience, and I needed money, I went up and signed up, and I went there early in the morning when they give out your assignments. And they assigned me to a company called Oso White Bleach Company. It was at 38th and Kedzie. And so I went over there, and the first week I worked there, I would go back to the Manpower office at the end of the day, and I would get my $8. But after the first week, the guy that ran that company, a Jewish guy, he said, why don't you just come here every week instead of going there? Because I could use you. I had worked hard. So I did that, and then I would just go on Friday and get my check at the Manpower place. And it would be like $40 or, close to it or whatever. And I would ride the bus, but I never had any lunch money or anything like that. So when I went there and worked, I just worked, and at lunchtime I would just sit down and wait till the other guys, they was, 4 or 5 regular people that worked there, and we made bleach. And if I didn't have any money to ride the bus, in Chicago at that time, it costs $0.25 to ride the bus, and they give you a transfer if you ask for it. And you could transfer to any bus going in a different direction. You couldn't transfer it back to the same direction. But you could go all over the city of Chicago, which is 25 miles in each direction, with one 25-cent fare if you got a transfer each time. And a lot of times people would have a transfer, and when they got off the bus, there was usually a garbage can there, a metal garbage can. And they would throw their transfers in there when they got off the bus, because most people at that time were riding the public transportation, because people lived in the city, and they worked, and they didn't own cars. I mean, it wasn't like it is today. I mean, you weren't driving in from the suburbs or anything like that. And what you could do, what I would do, is if you pick those transfers up and look at them, you could use those transfers instead of using a quarter. And the bus drivers, if there was a lot of people getting on the bus, they never even looked at the transfers. They just took them. And if you were going to change directions again, you could ask for another transfer, and they would hand you another, one, and you could use that transfer. So I figured out the system to get back and forth to work. And, of course, making bleach probably wasn't the best thing to be doing because, chlorine, we got chlorine in a big tank off of a railroad car. And the railroad car, they'd spot the railroad car beside the building that was a railroad track. And we would use a hoist, and it had a rail. It ran, and we could take that big tank, and we would guide that thing into the plant. And then we would run whatever we needed out of there. It had a faucet on it, or spigot, or whatever you want to call it. And we mixed that stuff to make bleach. And this wasn't bleach that you sell to the general public, like in gallons or quarts or something like that. This bleach was in 5-gallon glass jars. That glass jug, 5-gallon, that alone weighed about 20 pounds, it seemed like, And
I would say around 40 pounds, not including the glass.
The bleach, I'm talking about just the glass.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them had a wooden frame around, okay? And you set the glass down in that wooden frame so it wouldn't get broke. And then you could carry you grab it by that wooden frame, and then the bleach went in those 5-gallon jugs or whatever you want to call them, and it didn't have screw on tops. They had stoppers that you put in. And we would make those all day, and we would have them lined up there. And then on Thursday, a guy came with a truck, a box truck, a box truck, or whatever you want to call it. And we would load him on Wednesday night. He would come there on Wednesday afternoon, and we would load that whole truck up. And then on Thursday, he made deliveries, and he made deliveries to all these dry cleaning and washateer places and things like that, where they did laundry. And in Chicago at that time, most of those laundries were Chinese laundries. I mean, there was some hotels that you delivered to because they wash, the bed linen and stuff like that. So we would, you go to the downtown Chicago is where we mostly went to. I mean, there was some in the suburbs too, and they were easy to get to the suburbs, but downtown Chicago was hard to get to because you couldn't take that truck, on the big streets in Chicago. You had to go up and down the alleys, and you had to make your delivery. Sometimes you'd have to carry that 5-gallon of bleach. You'd have to carry it for a block because you couldn't get any closer than that. And we didn't have two-wheel dollies. At that time, I didn't even know what a two-wheel dolly was, but you had to carry that stuff. And you could get one in each, they'd be about 60 pounds, each one of them. You get one in each hand, and you go off down the alley till you get to the Chinese laundry, and you take them in there, and then you get an empties coming back, and that'd be another 40 pound you got coming back. Anyhow, you did that. We did that, and I learned the city that way because we went all over the city. Every Thursday we did that. Of course, you get you splash that bleach on your clothes, and pretty soon your clothes just fall off of you because that bleach was pretty harsh. And we never exchanged any money or anything like that. I don't know how the billing was done at that time. I didn't care. I just know that on Thursdays I'd be hauling that bleach, and I did that all summer. At that time, the stockyards was on fire. You know, the stockyards used to be in Chicago, where they brought all the cattle in and everything, and it was like inner city stockyards. I mean, it was a huge area. Sometimes we would even go by the stockyards and deliver, but when the fire was going on, it smelled so bad, we wouldn't go over there when it was burning, but it burned for weeks, it seemed like, and it was an awful odor. But I remember that part of it. And then the good news, when we would go on that Thursday trip, the truck driver would buy my lunch. You know, I'd have a hamburger or something like that. And he was a nice guy. You know, he was probably 30, 35 years old. And he didn't work for the bleach company. He worked for a cartage company that made deliveries. But the same guy came every week. And I was always the guy, because those other guys that worked in the shop before I started doing it, they didn't like delivering because that's heavy work. You know, carrying those bottles of bleach around. And sometimes when the bottle didn't have any crate around it, you'd have to throw it up on your shoulder because you couldn't carry it in your arm. I mean, the only way you could carry it is grab it by the neck and throw it on your shoulder and carry it, and you'd have to be careful so that stopper didn't come out and you get bleach everywhere. That'd be just a big disaster. But yeah, sometimes you would go there and the crate would be tore up or something, and then you would have to do it. Most of the time, coming back is when the crates would be tore up. 'Cause when we packed the truck every day, we'd make sure it had a crate. But a lot of times when you go and pick the empties up, somebody would be tore the crate up, or they wouldn't be there, and then you would just be carrying the bottles. But I did that all summer, you know, and I got over to around the 1st of September, and I had been by the Nabisco plant, and there was an awful lot of people. You know, there had to be 3,000 people working at the Nabisco plant. And I thought, well, maybe I could get a job over there. And they'd pay a little bit more, you know, and maybe it'd be a little bit more secure. So I went over and applied, and they hired me, and I went to work on the 3rd shift. And I was a mixer's helper. You know, you mix the dough upstairs. You know, there was like a 10-story building or something like that. I can't remember how many, but it was a huge building. But we mixed dough upstairs, and then we fed it down a chute. And it went down to the ovens in the lower floors, and then they ran through the ovens, and it baked the cookies and the crackers and things like that. And I worked there not very long. I didn't like it. It was okay. I mean, I would still be there probably. But a couple of guys I knew told me they were hiring at a new box plant. And it was in the clearing area. It was fairly convenient. And they said, why don't you go with us? We're going to go out there and try to get a job. So I went with James Rose and J.C. Bass. And we went out to that box plant. We put in an application. And we all worked there for a while. But, you know, we would always be broke. Come Friday, we'd want to get our check. We'd go there. We're working the 2nd shift, you know, 4 to 12, whatever. And we would go there on Friday morning and get our check because we wouldn't have any money. We'd be run out of money by Friday. So we were worked there for a while, and we went there on a Friday morning, and we saw Dick Werda. He was a superintendent. We said, can we get our check? And he said, yeah, you can get your check, but you got to make sure you come in tonight because I need you guys. And I said, no problem. So J.C. and James, they got their check, and they decided they wasn't going to go to work that night. And I was riding with them. I didn't have a car. And when I found out they wasn't going to go to work, you know, I was scrambling around because I didn't want to lose my job. I wanted to work. I mean, every hour I could get in, I was putting in, overtime or anything else. Anyhow, I caught the city bus and I rode out there, and then I had to walk because the city bus didn't go all the way to the plant. You had to walk about 10 blocks. But I walked the rest of the way, and I got there and I was late.
Mm-hmm.
I was like 15, 20 minutes late. As hard as I had tried to get there on time, I was late. And Dick Werda was a superintendent, and he was at the time clock when I got there. And he was pulling our cars because he was going to fire us. And I apologized. I said, man, I'm sorry. You know, them guys are supposed to pick me up. I waited for them. They didn't pick me up. And I said, I'm sorry I'm late, but, you know, give me a chance. And he handed me my time card. And I punched it in, and I went to work. And one of those guys came back on Monday. He fired both of them.